The Youth for Tax Justice Network, with support from the Australian Development Corporation, organized the Youth Action Climate Justice Debate on 20th October 2024 at Cavendish University in Kampala, Uganda.
What then maybe we are also going to do is that whichever abstracts that we received, we are going to compile it to a compendium and we shall publish that. So at least everyone's ideas will go to be seen by someone beyond this room, beyond the people that are watching us right now, beyond what we've said we will do here. So let's start from there that whatever happens today, these judges of yours are very senior debaters, and I know they are going to do a good job. Help them give us the best ideas that we can have. And then we will continue, like we say, this is a process that we hope to go on for at least the next 3 years. So let's not stop here and let's keep doing what we do best. Thank you very much.
This inspiring event brought together participants from various institutions including Makerere University Kampala, Makerere University Business School, Uganda Catholic University, Kampala International University and Cavendish University. The debate kicked off with the first motion. Does CBAM ensure equity in climate responsibility?
Now, panel, this is what I want us to understand, and this is what we are going to show you in this debate. We already show you because we believe we all know what CBAM is. We are going to frame this debate under 3 levels. We are going to show you what the importance of CBAM, but also we are going to show you on a principle level why this is necessary. But also what we show you is panel is we need to understand that the biggest role of CBAM is to ensure that you hold countries accountable for their carbon footprints, regardless of whether goods are like produced or not. But also it has to make sure it reduces global emissions, but also reduce on that kind of leakage. So before I actually go off, we'll show you one thing. We'll show you how developing countries look like and who the biggest polluters are in this kind of motion, and why we basically you need to understand that despite everything that happens, you still have to, our biggest role is to hold specific countries accountable and responsible. With that, I rest my case.
This is the leader of opposition. This house does not support CBAM to ensure equity in climate responsibility. As you can see, the effects of climate change, they are all throughout the world. And when you look at the countries that have supported CBAM, like China, do you really think they're not facing the adverse effects of climate change? Why are you focusing on CBAM and instead not looking at the other alternatives? When you look at CBAM, it's a very, very complex way of monitoring how the climate emissions are put into the environment and how maybe countries should, reduce on their emissions.
We do not have to narrow our minds only to developing countries. We're talking about equity. Equity is needed not only for developing countries, but we are in a scenario where we have to look at both developing countries and developed countries. CBAM is there for both the developing and the developed countries. Look at the main principles that CBAM relies on. It relies on 2 things: to prevent carbon leakage and the reduction of global emissions. When we talk about global emissions, keep it in mind, it is not only the emissions that happen in Uganda that affect the people who stay in Uganda actually. Like it or not, even the emissions that are happening in China right now, in one way or another, they are affecting you as a Ugandan. So if you're trying to concentrate on your problems, you yourselves as a Ugandan, because you believe you're so vulnerable and all that, you don't need help from other people, then you're wrong. There's nothing you're going to achieve at the end of it all.
Understand, this in of itself imposes a certain level of tax based on a particular good that in of itself has a defined level of carbon emission. That therefore means this is particularly in of itself harmful to the developing countries that most likely have to pay an extra tax, that the citizens most likely don't have adequate services, don't actually have adequate resources or adequate items in that regard. That most likely means the level of goods that come into these particular countries are things that are going to be expensive for this particular individual. Understand, we consent to the fact that climate change is something that needs effective solutions, that need effective change in everything. channeling this particular tax, it means the developing countries are going to have a lesser form of energy solutions, a lesser form of mechanisms to cope with this particular thing. Channeling into this particular thing, it means the level to which these particular developing countries, whose products are most likely expensive in vast majority of instances, they are going to accrue this particular level of tax in of itself. It means their own products are most likely going to be expensive through other export trades, because now understand an export becomes an import the other way.
Panel. One thing the opposition side has failed to understand is that we are here to talk about equity, and we are here to talk about responsibility, environmental responsibility. Now, opposition side comes here and tells us about economic growth, and their side, their case is all about economic growth. But one thing I would like to inform you, opposition side, is that right now we are looking at climate responsibility, and we are looking at how these countries, whether they are developed or whether they are not developed, are transiting from cases of emitting more carbon to the environment. Now, this is where my case stands. I'd like to inform the opposition side that these countries, you're saying that they are not benefiting from CBAM, are benefiting in this way. CBAM is helping these developing countries, or the less developed countries, to transition to cases of producing less at a moment. And when they are producing less, we are not looking at increase in prices or price taxing. We are looking at sustainability of our environment.
But maybe what team opposition does not understand is what CBAM actually is. CBAM is majorly in the European Union, and it was founded especially because of the laws on against emissions of that industries are doing in the European Union. Now, these industries, so that they are being highly taxed, so they decided to run away from the stricter countries and go to countries like Uganda and whichever other country that will allow to take them in, that have weaker regulations, so they can continue to emit more, but then take back their same goods back to the European Union. Still, they'll be making profits, but escaping the punishment. Now, that is why CBAM is in place. It is to punish these perpetrators. Now, regardless of whether you're in which country, if you want to import your good into, I'll take you later. If you want to import your good into the European Union, we are going to tax you basing on the carbon content of your good.
When we talk about more of unity, is that we respect countries' capacity to put in place some things. Why that becomes important is that you ease things like technology development, you ease things like innovation, because anyways, people have been given the actual capacity they deserve to attain. I think that is something you also need to look at. Then why our closing cannot actually rank above us is that in their mindset they think that a country that can't lose a lot would probably buy into an idea if it doesn't have any harm on them. Their logic is flawed and they cannot take up any position in this debate. Why we also rank above the opening government is that they only tell us about the challenges that are in status quo that we agree are problems, but do not take emphasis on what solution is really necessary. I beg to rest.
In the second round, participants tackled the motion, climate migration should be recognized as a fundamental human right.
According to the International Organization of Migration, in short IOM, climate migration refers to the movement of people due to changes in their environment resulting from climate change. Please also note that these movements can occur within the country or across borders. It may be temporary or permanent, voluntary or forced. Maybe to also add, environmental migrants are persons or groups of persons who, for some compelling reasons of sudden or progressive changes in their environment that adversely affect their lives or living conditions, are obliged to leave their habitual homes or choose to do so either temporarily or permanently, and who move either within their country or abroad. Thank you.
climate change has become part of the global agenda worldwide. We have exacerbated floods, we have hurricanes all around there, we have landslides, and all these things are actually impacting the livelihood of people. The livelihood of people is at risk, and people are dying. That is why we come here today to advocate for climate migration. But first of all, just as on account of principle, why do we need to recognize climate migration as a fundamental human right? We need to recognize climate migration as a fundamental human right because it threatens the existence of people. It threatens the existence of livelihood and humanity. Why we need to recognize it as a fundamental human right? It's because that it's climate change and all its effects are universal and they affect everyone. They are non-discriminatory depending on your color, country, wealth, income. Climate change is an issue that cuts across everywhere. That is why we believe that climate migration has to be added on the fundamental human rights. People should be allowed to migrate.
We think that when you have this as a sort of like fundamental human right, it is going to reduce then the incentive that governments necessarily have to even better the policies that already particularly exist within those particular states. To the extent that making this a human right fundamental sort of exacerbates such things upon state, we think it is inherently detrimental. We think it is something that is problematic at the end of the day. Why do we think this is exclusively bad? When you have governments neglecting the responsibility of these individuals, taking them to other states, or even most likely taking them to different parts of the state, it looks like they then have a less incentive to even better those situations. Why is this true? Simply because they then think that when those individuals leave, then the burden has then sort of been removed from their hands. Then we think that this is something that becomes problematic, because when you have these governments neglecting the responsibility, there is continuous perpetuation of climate change within society. Then we think this is something bad. This is something that cannot run or fly in the debate.
We have to look at different things when answering this question. The intensity of the problem that is at hand. If very many people are dying at the hands of floods, very many people are dying at the hands of drought, should we then leave them? Isn't that important enough for team opposition to actually realize that we actually need this policy at hand? But secondly, the vulnerability of these people. We understand the fact that these people, most probably, if it is a direct cause of their actions, it is because they are vulnerable. Why? Because in most cases, we'll find out that these people, because of their vulnerability, they then tend to use resources in the environment, and then these resources being misused then becomes a problem, which then in turn becomes climate change effects. For instance, if people do not have access to energy sources that are clean, they'll then tend to go to the forest, to deforest it, and do all that, which is then part of the vulnerability of the people, and it means that the outcome of that will then be a climate change effect. Why? Because we think that when these people then do that, it is then necessary for them to be evacuated from such places and taken to different places where they can then be empowered to come out of their vulnerability and then create a more just society where we do not have climate change again occurring in the other places that have been taken.
Why should your right to migrate to another country be something fundamental to the extent at which, regardless the terms and conditions and other circumstances that may arise, we can't change that, we can't remove that? That is exactly what the debate is, and I think that is what OJ tries to tell you within like his leader of hope speech.
I think in of itself, to access those structures that become important, here's the last extension. Things like the Berlin Conference, cross boundaries. These things were generally made because of the Berlin Conference, because King Leopold wants more piece of land, because Queen Elizabeth thinks they should have Uganda and the source of the line. Things like distribution of state. Two problems with this. One, there was no consideration for the countries whose independence they were taking away. But second, it was because of irrationality and what people felt their egos were. The conclusion is these states were illegitimately formed. This is for within movement of like Ghana and Uganda to access things in Kenya. These boundaries were illegitimately formed. It simply means then that you are justified and you have that right to access those structures because the boundaries that limit you were illegitimately formed. It is not legitimate. You therefore are justified to access those structures in of itself. Pragmatics, because I don't know what judges will be looking at in this debate, is that at the end of the day, states will be now forced to fix their houses, because even people in the US would want to access Uganda. In our world, all countries fix their safe havens to allow other people, and proud CG.
In the Cattle Corridor, there was a lot of nomadic pastoralism. People are moving up and down. When it's raining this side, they go in the side that is raining. When it's drought on the other side, they run away. But then, how sustainable was this? They had to settle down and bring in methods like irrigation, Thank you for your time, and I hope we'll accept that making migration a fundamental right is not necessary because of what I've stated. Thank you.
What then should be done? It's what we need to look at. One, the innovations to achieve the realities of the day needs to be seen. One, in the Chiruhura problem, we see the creation of varied dams, creation of irrigation system, creation of now in the current world where we are spreading the idea of climate better seedlings for our people, that when it shines, at least we can have something to sell and realize money and even realize food so that we can solve the scourge of malnutrition in the current day and age that as I conclude. The problem for me I face with AI is not a problem of losing jobs. It's a problem that Africans and the people in the lower countries will not be able to compete because their brains will not have developed because of malnutrition. That is the problem I bring on the table. We bring a good case. Thank you so much.
Finally, after rigorous rounds of debating, the top teams advanced to the final round with a motion. This House would prioritize national energy needs over collective global climate mitigation and adaptation goals.
Thank you. Congratulations to the teams that have reached this far. So for the final resolution, this House would prioritize national energy needs over collective global climate mitigation and adaptation goals.
Panel, in this particular instance, opening government really supports this motion in the context that we put up a question in this debate that the question we indeed to prove in this particular instance is how failure to prioritize national energy needs has been a factor to climate change which harms the environment and also shows that the chain of cooperation of this energy cuts across many sectors, for example, industries, transport system, housing, among others. So what then do we emphasize? We emphasize that prioritizing national energy needs is one of the factors that supports economic growth and development that enables us to have the capacity to be able to participate in global climate mitigation adaptation goals. Therefore, it cannot be left out.
Some countries continuously try to sit back and wait for a global call to happen. Anyways, developed states would continue to front agendas that favor them at the expense of these individuals that are in LDCs. Why that is bad is that you worsen your position and you never get momentum to ever go away from that problem, but rather they utilize you as a source of more money in implementing those global policies. I beg to rest.
I would like to draw down to these three things. Number one, the reality. Number two, sustainability versus a comprehensive approach. And lastly, the impact analysis, which basically they have failed to engage with. When we look at climate agreements like the Paris Agreement, we have seen that they have been designed to balance both developed and undeveloped countries.
The leader of opposition came here smartly and addressed this clash. She asked, if prioritizing is making one thing better than the other, which the member of the government actually concedes to that prioritization is indeed making one thing better than the other, then what exactly is your point in today's debate? And we ask the same question, what is over those of the whole world? Again, we should understand that priority means giving something the upper hand. Therefore, in that very same spirit, drawing a soft line that you're going to follow the grand agenda in your own native way does not necessarily mean that you are prioritizing your own energy needs. It simply means that you're complying with a grander global agenda. So therefore, distinguished panelists, thank you very much for your time. I beg to conclude my case by saying climate change is collective and only collective action can work in such a fight. Thank you.
The event concluded with the announcement of the winners, who are recognized and celebrated for their exceptional performance, innovative ideas, and commitment to climate justice.
I'm going to announce this ranking from number 4 up to the best. In number 4, the judges felt that the opening opposition deserved number 4. And indeed, that was the team that finished 4th. Let's give them a round of applause. It's not easy. I've ranked 4th myself, so. In third place, the judges again felt unanimously that the opening government finished number 3. Hey, I told you, I'm the angel of death. Hey, I'm here to break hearts. Hey. Which then leaves two teams, the closing opposition and the closing government. And the judges felt that the closing opposition that the closing opposition did such a wonderful job and therefore deserved to finish as number 1, and the eventual winners of our debate series, congratulations, which automatically means by a whisker that the closing government finished number 2. Congratulations to all the teams. And again, I've been told to re-echo the fact that these teams, again, you are asked to come on the 28th at, I think, Kabira, where the ceremonies will be done, the closing ceremonies will be done. But congratulations once again to the teams. For those of you who have missed out, please don't feel disheartened. There's always a next time. From the Chief Adjudication Panel, thank you so much for being an amazing crowd and for giving us all these arguments that you gave us. And all the best until we meet again. Thank you.